Welcome to We Weren't Supposed to Exist. Conversations about belonging, meaning making, and the ecology of human beings. Welcome, everyone. I'm Cher Griffin, founder of the Compassion Collective, doctoral student in transformative social change, cognitive ecologist, and your host of We Weren't Supposed to Exist. This podcast began with a simple question. What happens when the people whose minds, bodies, identities, or ways of knowing have been pushed to the margins start telling their own stories? Each week, I sit down with thinkers, practitioners, researchers, creators, and change makers to explore the many ways human beings make meaning, build community, and imagine new possibilities for living together. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Cecile Green. Cecile works at the intersection of organizational development, shared leadership, human development, and transformational change. Through her work with Round Sky Solutions, she helps organizations create healthier ways of sharing power, making decisions together, and building cultures where people can participate more fully and authentically. One of the reasons I was excited to invite Cecile onto the podcast is that I think many people don't realize that organizations like this already exist. Around the world, people are actively experimenting with new ways of organizing ourselves, approaches that move beyond traditional hierarchy towards forms of collaboration, shared leadership, distributed decision making, and more participatory forms of governance. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where this conversation takes us. And as always, I'll start with the same question. Cecile, what does Gestalt language processing mean to you?
Thanks, Cher. It's such an honor to be here with you today. Thank you. And thank you for your work. It definitely has it has spoken to me and continues to speak to me at a really deep level. And one of those levels is around Gestalt language processing, which is a term that was new to me until I found your work. And I have to admit, I'm at the very beginning stages of really understanding what it means. But for myself, I think it means the ability to construct meaning and then language in more of a holographic, holistic way, as opposed to perhaps how other people think. And since I believe I may have it, but I don't know, I'm like one of the questions, do you have a test? I love little tests, um, but regardless, yeah, it to me it means sort of understanding life from a larger perspective rather than the small sort of minute sequential order of things unfolding. And as such, I feel it has. If I have it, which I think I might, it deeply shapes um, how I make meaning from a place of feeling first, sensing first.
Mhm.
So one of the terms I gave to myself a while back was an experiential philosopher,
Oh, I love that.
meaning that I start from that place of my own experience to then sort of generalize and look at what this might mean for others and for life and for the universe as a whole. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a beautiful description, a beautiful definition. I mean, I don't think that there is like a solid definition
Hmm.
of Gestalt language processing, right? Like
Okay.
we have a lot of really good research that has been done. Marge LeBlanc did a lot of really good research on autistic children, like some
Mhm.
longitudinal research. But that was observational research. She was observing
Yeah.
children's language development from the outside. And
Yeah.
then how I came to this work was
Mhm.
into this am I a Gestalt language processor? Like this is feeling really weird, was Jamie Horrick's work, also
Mm.
on Substack for my followers, also my first guest on this podcast, so you can um,
Nice.
roll backwards and watch that episode. But um, it was difficult for me to go, am I like this feels right? It
Mm.
feels right,
Mm.
and then I think, oh, well, that's interesting because if it feels like if I'm feeling this whole, um,
Mm.
then I think yeah, and so. I read Jamie Horwick's book when I first was kind of exploring the autistic thing. and
Mm,
was like, am I autistic? Like, what's going on here?
mm,
And it was called No Place for Autism. Also, great book.
mm,
And I read that book and was just like, my jaw dropped. There was something about the way that Jamie explained the experience that I was just like, oh, yeah, this is it. This is what's going on with me. And that book isn't specifically about Gestalt language processing, but I mean, it was
yeah,
written by a Gestalt language processor. So
yeah.
it just, I fell myself in it. But I want to talk a little bit about like the fe more about the feeling. I love the way you put that, feeling philosopher. Like I feel like that when I'm having these guests on this podcast, and I think we're all kind of circling that, right? It's like this, we some people call it like an intuitive feeling, some people call it, but it's like a whole. It's just like there's
Mm,
something that grabs me, and then it's like, and then like a holographic thing, like you were saying, and then I pull it apart. And then
mm,
I figure out, oh, what is this? What is this thing? I mean,
yeah.
does that make sense? Does that feel
Yes,
like
completely.
okay?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the more you talk, the more I'm able to sort of see myself in your words. And what's interesting is that I didn't know this was not normal. I guess that's the fish swimming in the water, right?
Yeah,
We don't necessarily know these things.
yeah.
Yeah, so uh, for sure, and especially as I think about the work I've done around power and how it manifests in our current world, and the possibility that it could be different, and I'm talking about human social power here.
Hmm.
That is literally what happened for me. It was my own embodied experience of toxic use of power after toxic use of power after toxic use of power that I finally was like, damn, isn't
Yeah.
there a better way to do this?
Yeah.
And so then began to sort of unpack it. But it was first a phenomena in my body,
Yeah.
um, and my whole being really before it became something I could metabolize
Yeah.
in my head.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I just like I pulled a thread from you. I'm like, power, yes. I think that's kind of how I came into this work as well, and into, I mean, my personal discovery, self-discovery work, but also the work that I do in community and in my
Mm,
educational work was because of these experiences that I was having as well in
yeah.
workplaces, in relationships, in community spaces, right? It was just like, I'm like, and it was like, am I the common denominator here? Like, why does this keep happening to me? Like, what am I doing? And I
Mm.
went down all the paths. I got a psychology degree, and like I was like, what is wrong with my brain? Because that's where I went first, because that's what
Ah,
society tells us to do,
yes,
right?
yes, of
It says
course,
there's
yes.
something wrong with you. You have a
Mm.
pathology. You have a mental health issue, and it turns out I don't
Right?
have any of those things. Um,
Mm,
but I had to break apart the whole to figure that out.
yeah.
And so that's how I ended up in
Mm,
doing this work.
mm,
And I find it fascinating because integral theory, and your organization is an integral organization. Um, I that was one that I ended up there somehow in this whole power thing. I ended up in Ken Wilber's work, which I came in
mm,
through. I came into Ken Wilber's work in an interesting way, different than most people. I read Grace and Grit,
right.
and so I didn't come in from that other, organizational side, or,
Ah,
I think people come in different directions.
yes, yeah.
And so I actually really identified with Treya, with his wife, and
Ah,
a lot of people don't even know about her, which I'm fascinated about. I'm like,
yeah,
how do
yeah.
you think Ken got like there? There was something else happening there, and but I did identify with the framework. I think
Yeah.
Gestalt processors, we have a kind of a holoographic way of understanding
Yeah.
framework systems, processes, these kinds of things.
Mm,
We feel it, we understand it through kind of moving through it. And so integral theory was like, I was like, yeah, duh.
of course.
Kind of, you know,
Yeah.
and and then I
Yes.
get into some of these other spaces, and I mean, we don't have to go deep into this, but I think it's
Mm,
important for our listeners to understand, like, um, just because a theory or a community um, kind of has this orientation around a map, a framework, doesn't
Mm,
always mean that they have the same orientation around power. And
mm,
that's where I started to find kind of, because I was jumping communities, went to the
yeah.
modern communities and the
Mm,
integral communities, and I was
nice.
just all over the place
Yeah.
and really just feeling in those communities and realized that I wasn't really welcome in some of them, which was kind of fat. And I think maybe you've had some of that experience too, just feeling kind of like, wait a second,
Mm,
what are we doing here? Right?
hmm hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Boy, there's so many threads I'd love to pull on to understand your backstory too. And one of the things that really struck me when I encountered integral theory, and this was back in the aughts, 2008, 2009, 2010 or so, was the absence of any reference to power
Mm,
as or and none of the framework really spoke in an effective way to power. Like I
mm,
would hear people, break it down according to the quadrants, but it wasn't actually, mm, shall I say, enactable or effective.
mhm,
Uh, and I found the absence really significant, and especially as I went further in my understanding of integral theory, I came up with some theories as to why that might be the case, but ultimately, for me, it was one of the most important things that we needed to unpack, understand, and do something about. And often, in various integral spaces, that got labeled as a green interest or sort of a lower level of development interest, put down,
mhm.
essentially relegated to something not important. And since I knew it was super important, I suspected that there was a lot of shadow around it in the
Oh,
integral movement.
yeah.
And various folks can share their own stories about that. But I regardless, felt that the integral theory itself was tremendously helpful in terms of shaping some theories of power. And so that was where I went with it was to create something I call the power matrix, which as it lays out four dimensions of power that are what I call operationally relevant. So they show up when we are doing stuff together. And it doesn't matter whether you're just two people planning a party or an entire organization. These are meta sort of categories of power that express themselves in any set of interactions. Um, would you like me to go through the power matrix briefly?
I'm fascinated by it. I'm like taking notes right now.
I
Just
see, I
kidding.
see. We don't have to go there,
I mean,
but
we can, but before we do that, I'm going to pause for 1 second because I have to close my door because I forgot.
okay.
Okay, sorry for the pause, folks. Cats and yeah, things in the background. Um, so yeah, Power Matrix. So I also kind of had that kind of that phenomenon happened for me too. I
Mm,
don't think that I knew that I could identify power. I felt
mm,
it. And
mm,
so what was interesting is kind of after integral theory for me. I moved into a lot of shared decision-making frameworks,
interesting.
sociocracy,
Yeah.
holacracy,
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
these
yeah.
different frameworks, and
Oh, sweet.
spent some time in those communities, and
Uh,
that was different. That was a whole different experience. A whole different experience. Ted Rao of
mm,
Sociocracy. I
mm,
had some great experiences joining some of
mm,
their like facilitations and whatnot, and
mm,
learned a lot. And really, the underlying framework of the Compassion Collective
mm,
is kind of a holacracy, sociocracy hybrid-y thing. So,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
so I'm curious to hear. I want to hear about the Matrix, and I think that our listeners will as well, because yeah, this maybe it might be the thing that I need right now.
Mm, mm. So, yeah, I guess I want to preface it by saying that the Power Matrix is a wonderful map, but it is not the territory. And for me, the most important thing was how to make it operationally active, which is a subsequent set of subsequent framework that sort of enabled that. But yeah, briefly, the power matrix is it's a 2 by 2 matrix. The vertical axis has autonomous power at the top and collective power at the bottom. And the horizontal axis has implicit power on the left and explicit power on the right.
Mm,
So
yeah.
basically, all four forms of these power are active anytime we're doing stuff together. Autonomous power is the power any individual has to make a decision and do something on their own. And it doesn't necessarily just pertain to individuals, it also pertains to intact entities. So, yeah, so this does scale holonically. And then the collective power is what it sounds like. It's groups of people or groups of
Mm,
entities coming together to make decisions and do something together, right? Implicit power is the power that's usually behind our eyeballs. So you can think of the unconscious, subconscious stuff. This is where things like class, race, gender all play out.
mhm,
Personality too. And in the collective implicit, we have things like how language forms and is shaped and changed. So it's
mhm,
very implicit. It's very largely not outside where we can look to it and point to it, and usually often written down, but not always, sometimes more orally. But the explicit power is what it sounds like. It's the role that you have as founder of the Compassion Collective, for
mhm,
example, or a policeman might have, whatever role, finance lead you might have in an organization. So the key thing with the power matrix is to understand that when things are not going well, usually there's an imbalance in one or more of these forms of power. And the key is to then have an ecology of practices that enable you to metabolize that into new patterns that address that imbalance, address that problem, whatever it is, move it incrementally forward.
mm. Yeah. Oh, that's what's coming up for me is like I understand intellectually this whole thing, and I think that a lot of our listeners will as well. And I think that I want an example. Like I was like,
Yes.
I know I want to see, I want to like picture it, you know? Do you mind?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
I don't mind at all. Um, yeah, I wanna pull up our students have such wonderful examples. I almost want to pull up one of their exams to pull out a really rich real life example. Would you give me just a moment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great, because people's words are so so useful at really getting getting to the heart of things. Okay, so here's an example. Recently, and in her words, I'm gonna substitute names. Um, there's an older gentleman, and we'll give him the name of Mark. Recently, Mark met with a young man in town interested in doing an internship. For several reasons, Mark felt inclined to accept this person's offer of 5 hours of volunteer time a week, but he told him that he would need to run it past the cabinet first. Mark understood that since he would not be the one supervising him, he needed to bring the decision about moving forward to the larger group. As it turned out, the cabinet had a number of questions concerning the young man's intentions and desires, his resume and skills, and the feasibility of a 5 hour week internship, and the fairness implications of accepting unpaid and non student interns. We also uncovered gaps in our policies and preparation for taking on interns or volunteers. By allowing the explicit and collective power of the cabinet to enjoy its rightful place, Mark avoided using his implicit power as a seasoned worker and high up director or making an autonomous decision outside of his scope of work. So that
Mm,
was an example of a situation where the person
yeah.
was using power in a generally healthy manner, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I can give more examples if you'd like, but maybe
Well,
you have a way to dial in what your questions are about
yeah.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm reflecting on that example. And what I'm thinking about is how often, when we don't understand our implicit power, right, that we could think, well, I'm a director. I'm at the, I always make decisions for the organization. I know this person's
Exactly.
a good person. I know that they're going to
Yeah.
fit in just right. And all of those things, all of those ways of thinking are not
Mm,
necessarily good or bad, right?
that's right.
And right?
Yeah.
And bringing it to the collective, what did that open up? It didn't open up a decision of like, no, you're wrong. No, this
Mm,
we can't do this. It opened up oh, look at we have gaps in our system
yes.
that might be actually be harming people. It could
I
or
could.
maybe may or
Right.
may not, right? Be harming our organization, growth and development. Maybe not giving us enough opportunity to bring in um, different demographics of people who want to participate with us. I mean, that's what I found from it, which is like, right? I was like, oh,
Yeah.
um, and I mean, how simple too. Like, I think a lot of times
Mm,
people,
mm,
when I know, like this is my work is like, how do I make complex things simple for people? But it's really true that complexity is not really, it's not that complicated. It can be made very simple. And I think when people first are introduced to these frameworks, I'll kind of pull back to integral theory because I kind of found that in some of those spaces there was a lot of like repetition on okay, here's the framework of
mm,
like who knows it the best, right? Who can distinguish these things the best within the community? It was like, well, I don't know if we should be, but again, we didn't have the power framework to say like, hey, maybe that's not where you should be going, which is some of the things that I ran into, right?
mm,
And when I was in some of those spaces was absolutely an implicit power operating without the collective. And wow, wow. Like
mm,
I just see like how simple with the examples, how simple that is. It's just like all it's just a thoughtful approach. It's like when I have a decision to make, and we can I even feel like, oh my gosh, I could just bring this into like my family system, right? Like when
yeah.
I have a decision to make for that affects the entire my entire family, my children, my partner, even my cats and dogs, like I can think about all of that. But if I make that decision on my own,
Mm,
what might I be missing? What might
yes.
I lose out on by
Right.
making it by myself instead of making it a collective decision, which is
Agree.
has some implications.
It really does, right? And yeah, you're really highlighting one of the beautiful things that comes from thinking about power in, I'll just say, a more generative fashion is that we recognize that our own individual capacity to make decisions has some serious limits, and that bringing ourselves into the company of others that we trust and who have some bearing on whatever we're doing almost always produces better decisions, and not just necessarily the decision itself, but the fact that it will then be enacted
Mhm.
more readily
Yeah,
because those impacted have been included in the decision, right?
yeah,
So there's a lot of implications
yeah,
to thinking about power in a more thoughtful manner, more conscious and more deliberately with the intention of being more collaborative, more cooperative, because
hmm,
there are quite a few people out there who think about power, but it's largely for their own gain or benefit, right? As opposed
yeah,
to, yeah. Um, so.
absolutely.
But yeah, for me, the beauty of the power matrix really comes to life in action, as
Mhm.
you were just pointing to, which is, hey, I'm in this team situation. We have this particular issue coming up. Let's say our website needs to be updated, and maybe we've gotten some complaints from customers, and maybe I am the website manager and I have a certain number of accountabilities that clearly, that I could take action on. But I may also want to go back to the team and say, hey, let's have a brainstorming session. I'd love your input. What would you like to see happen
Mhm.
differently here? So there's a lot of really simple ways of including and using those perspectives to synthesize to something that's more better.
Yeah, mo better.
More
Yeah,
better.
that's
Now,
my
that's
brain.
not to say that every decision is better by bringing it into the collective. That is one of the other things that I really like about not just the power matrix, but also having an ecology of practices that help us is that we can recognize when the choice of paper for the paper machine, we really like the admin person to make that decision and not bring it back to the
Yeah.
group, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, I feel like there was something that triggered me there. Oh, I was thinking about like I think a lot of people they see this and they go, "Oh yeah, well that works if you just have um maybe just a small nonprofit or a small collective or a
mm,
small organization.
mm,
How does that scale?" And I keep thinking about that too, right? How
mm,
does that scale? Um, I know that a lot, I mean, that's where like I think the holocracy, sociocracy comes in is it does get a little bit more complex when you have like multiple different decision makers in multiple different roles, and then what kind of decisions are being made. Like when the marketing department needs to make a decision, does the marketing lead make that decision? Do they bring it to the collective of the marketing? Does the collective of the marketing bring it to the executive team? It's and so there are processes to kind of make that expand. And gosh, I think with some of the technology we have today, right? Like I'm thinking this is maybe how you scale this, right? Is that um, you can create these kind of not automated but semi-automated systems where those what's the word I'm looking for? Like the opportunity to decide, right? Like
mhm.
like let me show you, here's your decision tree. Like which direction do I need to go with this? It's almost like experiential training. This is like I'm just designing a system right now in this podcast. But do you see what I'm saying? It's like I feel like there is opportunity to scale. If we're really thoughtful about what that looks like. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, the short answer is absolutely. It scales quite well, actually. And the key concept that that rotates around or that it's grounded in um, is something I call distributing authority with scopes and roles. And so not just clear roles, but we also then have clear scopes, which you could think of scopes in sociocracy's term as circles.
Mm-hmm.
Holacracy, I think, uses the same term. I like the term scope because it really creates a clear grounding in the idea that there is a boundary, a scope of work that creates a team. So a team isn't just a compilation of individuals. It's actually got a very clear charter, which is the work that it's doing on behalf of the whole, the larger whole, whatever that larger whole is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then within that, there are specific roles filled by individuals, which then have the authority to get the work done. But that scope of work is critical in that it confers both the authority, the autonomy, and the accountability for getting the work done.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are key reporting functions inside the ecology of practices, which allow us to embed accountability and in a collaborative manner. Um, yeah, there's a lot to say there, but basically by scoping and having those scopes linked to each other so
Mm-hmm.
that they're not just randomly floating out there doing whatever they want, but they have an accountability to either higher or bigger or smaller scopes creates a beautiful and very organic way of organizing any work that you want to do.
Yeah. And so here's my systems change mine. So I worked in a pretty large healthcare system
Mm,
here in my state. And I was doing project management. I was overseeing like a lot of different projects, like 17 different behavioral health projects, but then also many of those projects intersected with other agencies, right? So,
yes.
just because it's within healthcare doesn't mean that it doesn't intersect with the justice system, doesn't mean that it doesn't intersect with like social policy. So we got the
Mm.
legislator. So there's just so many pieces. If people who've never worked in government systems don't recognize like how how
Yeah.
kind of we have a system built on some really old assumptions. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge to do systems change work within those
Yeah.
assumptions because
Right.
you're kind of constantly running into them. And
Yeah.
so, that's what I'm like. I'm thinking about this. I'm going. I think there you can scale just by starting small, like that, like within um
Yeah.
one project, and then it organically kind of just moves out into the rest of the system. And just for the listeners out there, so if you have how kind of I'll do this in a most simplified way, but so the legislature, you pass a bill. The bill comes to the agency that is chartered to make it happen, right? Like,
Yeah.
here's all the money. We need to build this bill now. Now we got to build rules for it, like, and then we have to hire people and make the thing happen. But that one bill might be who's accounted for it might be a health authority,
Mm.
but who's
Mm.
actually working on it, who we need to do it with us is going to then be again like the justice system, maybe emergency response systems. Like there's all these different systems then that also are responsible for holding pieces of this. And currently, in most of our government systems in the United States, I would say, and some are better than others,
Mm.
but
Mm.
because of that assumption, because we're still built on that hierarchy,
Mhm.
the autonomous decision making that is legitimate and within role and scope can get uh, the power over piece, right? Because of this hierarchy, can be delegitimized. It's humiliating in a way to work in a government system like that. It's humiliating.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead and finish
Oh,
your thought.
go ahead.
Well, I would say it's actually dysfunctional and
Mm,
has landed us in the stew pot that we're in.
hmm.
Um, and
Absolutely.
so one of the mistakes that I believe we made in our history as a species was to separate decision making from accountability.
Mm.
We
Oh,
sort of vacuumed up decision making into the role of the kings or the people who had the power, right? In
hmm.
our case, we're democratic government. We're doing the same thing. We're vacuuming that decision out of the hands of the people who are going to enact it,
Hmm.
making it in this sort of random, disconnected way, and then passing it back to the people who are going to enact it, and then are
Hmm.
surprised when it doesn't go
Mm.
well.
I know, right?
It just,
Yeah.
yeah. So one of the main things within the ecology of practices that we call collab is that we're reuniting decision making with accountability,
Hmm. Oh gosh,
and
I love
just
that.
distributing that throughout an organization. And in the instance that you were just giving of a policy made, the little thing we can do in the short run until we have enacted a more holistic way of operating is to simply have those other parties at the table as we're making that decision. Have a rep at least from all of the departments who are going to enact this thing, and
Hmm.
that they have a strong voice in shaping the course of that policy. Then I think at the very least we'll have a better capacity to enact it, and it'll be much less
Yeah.
humiliating, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
much less wasteful, because think about how many of those decisions are just like they're not enactable, or if they are, people are going to drag their feet and it's
Hmm.
going to take forever. And, you know, so
Yeah. Well, and I
it's
think
pretty
it,
costly.
yeah, well, and yes, it's that's like that's one thing I keep trying to tell. I was like, okay, so the hierarchy is actually costing us as taxpayers so much money, wasted money. And
Wasted.
so,
Yep.
Oregon its behavioral health system did attempt and I would say I wasn't directly um involved in this
Mm,
kind of way of creating program.
mm,
I was more on the outside of it, but uh, but I was able to kind of witness some of the pitfalls of trying to do collective decision making within a program
mm,
development.
mm.
which was really fast. It was done publicly.
Interesting.
It's all on, I'm
Hmm.
not talking about something that was like behind the things. It was all public. It was all, it was the Measure 110, which was when we
Hmm.
decriminalized the possession of small amounts of substances in the state of Oregon. And we won't get into all the, you know, ethical and what all those details about that. But it was a bill that was passed. And and so there was an attempt to really bring in the community
Hmm.
to that this specific bill would affect people in recovery, people who
Hmm.
have been affected by addiction, people who work in the system, people who, all of these things. And wow, it was fascinating in a lot of ways.
But
And because it was like old system of hierarchy with the new system kind of stuck in the middle, and people didn't know how to kind of um, to solve the problems with that because they'd never done it before. It was very experiential, and I
interesting.
think there was a
Hmm.
lot of success,
Hmm.
and I think there was also a lot of challenge. And the thing that what point that I wanted to get to was um, because of these assumptions, these hierarchical assumptions, this explicit or implicit, sometimes explicit power, sometimes both, um, and not knowing which way to go, right? Not
Yeah.
knowing
Yeah.
is this
Yeah.
autonomous or is this collective?
Right.
And there's a lot of pressure on, and I want to give a shout out to the people in these leadership positions because this is not a people issue. This is a structural issue. And that's the hardest thing is like when you talk about
Yeah.
this stuff,
Right.
and I can understand that when you're in a position with that much responsibility, but you have no mechanisms for that accountability, what do you do? What do you do, right? And so, yeah, I mean, all this work, I mean, that experience was traumatic for me. And I
Hmm.
recognize that it was structural and was not
Yeah.
personal, that I was being
Right. Oh, good.
harmed in that system.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Mm. Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, boy. Um, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
And good for them for trying some kind of, did they have a structure to the deliberation or was it just sort of
Yeah,
ad
I mean,
hoc?
yeah, well, they did have a structure, which was, I
Okay.
think, created by a committee. So they had
Hmm.
like a committee structure, and who was chosen on the committee was still chosen kind of in the old hierarchical way of,
Right.
so who was on the committee was already like, is this, are these the correct people to be in this space
Hmm.
together, right?
Hmm.
And then I also believe that because of that specific scope, right? Where I'm going to use your language here, that specific scope was it was very diverse,
Hmm.
incredibly diverse amongst every intersection that you can think of, race, class, gender. That's great.
Hmm.
That diversity was great, but because of that diversity as well, what people I think there was some uh, assumption about what people understood individually,
Hmm.
and where their level of knowledge was within the system and processes to begin with. So I think a lot of what occurred from my perspective, right, from this kind of mostly from the outside in, was that there was a lot of learning happening publicly, a
Hmm.
lot of like mistakes, a lot of, and we didn't have uh necessarily a restorative practices for that, right? We didn't have
Ah, okay.
practices for
You
repair
got it.
when those
Yes.
things kept occurring. And so then
Yes.
the harm kind of started to
Accumulate.
accumulate.
Yeah.
And so from the outside in, it looks like conflict, right? It looks like this isn't working. It looks like I mean, I think from a community perspective, from people in Oregon who are watching from the outside, we're seeing it as these people don't know what they're doing instead of this structure still needs some development
Yes. Yeah.
um and you know what I'm trying to say. So
Yes. Yes, I do. Boy, well, again, just kudos to trying at all and learning publicly is really hard. And I just just thank you to everyone who did that because
yeah.
because that's really deeply needed. And one of the offshoots from Round Sky is a project called the Commoning Standard, and it's essentially taking the basic insight that there is an ecology of practices that will help us cooperate and collaborate safely and reliably over time,
Hmm.
and including things like interpersonal tension resolution, like conflict resolution, conflict repair, like um, and when I use the term ecology because it's not just decision making, right? It's also repairing when emotional damage has happened. It's
Hmm.
also accountability, hugely important. It's also, there's, you know, at least seven different conversations, I believe, that need to be addressed as we're doing any work together. Um,
Yeah.
but what the Commoning Standard is hoping to do is to bring together all of the in time, all of the researchers and practitioners who have invested time and energy into understanding what does this take, what needs to go into this ecology practices, and
Hmm.
synthesizing that into a standard that folks can say, okay, if we use this set of practices, we're going to have a more reliably successful experience. And so learning experiences like what you did in Oregon are critical to that, because
Hmm.
how else are we going to do this? Yes, there's
Yeah.
some theory and research out there, which is great, and we'll bring that in, but the practitioner experience is vital. And so one of the one of the projects within the Commoning Standard right now is bringing together individuals in the field of deliberation to create what is the best way to go through a deliberative process? How do we successfully, like over, dozens, if not hundreds of different,
Hmm.
theories, practices out there, what is that synthesis that can reliably get us to, what
Yeah.
we need and want in this instance? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And I think our social systems, it's like we need it just desperately right now. We need to be doing this, right?
desperately,
We need to be doing this work. And
yeah.
uh yeah, just for listeners out there too, is like Measure 110 was such a was a very much an experiment, um uh and I want people to try and start thinking about things like this, about these types of experiments,
Mm.
because I think we're going to start seeing more of them. We're going to start seeing communities coming to solve problems together, because we got some problems upstairs. So that's all I'll say. We have problems with it. So we're going to need to solve problems together. And so it's like, instead of looking at it from this kind of black, we'll get back to Gestalt language processing here, I guess. Instead of looking at things in like a black and white way, right? As
Mm.
in, that didn't work or it did work, or
Right.
that person is bad at their job or they're good at their job. Instead of looking at things that way, if we can start looking at things like with feedback loops, with, okay, what did we learn from that experience of trying it that way? What did we know didn't work, and why? Why? Like, let's get down really to the structure, right?
Yes.
I've thought about
Yes.
this quite a few times where I'm like, I just kind of, this would be a project, but because there's just so much content in regards to Measure 110 and in regards to that
Mm.
specific
Mm.
program, that specific process, but I kind of want to do that, right? I want to say, well, okay, what was the structural, where was our leverage points that we missed? Where were the gaps that we didn't
Yeah.
see? All of these kinds of things, because that's what helps us move forward on the next one. So let's bring it
Yes.
back down to scale. And if you're doing this in just a small community space, it's the same process. It's saying, okay, we tried, we had some issues. There were some challenges, but let's look at it together as a whole. Like, where were the gaps? Where were we not seeing things? Who was missing? Who was missing? Like, that's a big one. Who was missing from this? And what I like to promote is like, yeah, this is hard. Yes, change is hard. And it's so worth it. It's so, like, I go back to the tiny little scale of this, is like, even for me on my
Mm.
own journey and my own path, like, first I was like, oh, maybe I need to change because I'm the common denominator here. And some of what I had gone through earlier in my life did need to change. And that
Mm.
was hard. I needed to look
Mm.
at myself differently. That was the change, right?
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, what came from that was a more uh, a better operating system. That's it. I have a better operating system now, right?
Right, right,
Because
right.
I can see it. I can
Mm,
see how I'm
mm,
making meaning. And
mm.
yeah, I don't know if that makes, I'm just trying to bring it back.
Yes, it definitely makes sense. And one of the things I want to double click on or just come back to because I feel it's so important is that reflexive learning that you're demonstrating and that it resulted for you in a better operating system. Well, groups of people can and should do the same.
Mhm.
And I would also caution that while experimentation is wonderful and it's needed, it can also burn people out and
Mm,
traumatize people significantly, right? And so I do encourage people to take advantage of what has been learned already because
yeah,
you don't really want to be causing harm if you don't have to, right?
yeah.
So take what's out there, learn, and then apply it, and then learn, and then keep iterating.
Hmm.
One of the most critical things I've learned around this work with power is that this is something we have to unlearn and relearn. And as such, grounding it in a new set of practices that help us share power well from pretty much the get-go and then change as we need to. And
Yeah.
everybody's got different changes they need to make, right? And
Mhm.
so having this be a collective practice that brings us to, a pretty reliable capacity to make decisions well together that don't take 3 years, that
Mhm.
be accountable back to each other in ways that don't cause harm to other people in the group,
Mhm.
resolve conflict readily. All of that is not only possible, but it needs to be learned. And so doing this in an iterative fashion where you have a space where you're coming together and can use these practices regularly
Yeah.
enables each of us to skill up according to where our needs are in a way that's really beautiful and compassionate and leaves room for us to still make mistakes and come back, but it's less traumatizing along the way.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, that's very, very important for me. Um, a lot of my work is around trauma awareness, being trauma informed. And I think that those are all really important, um, also really important educational pieces. Um, but truly being individually informed that trauma exists and that
Mm,
possibly you're carrying some that you're even unaware of, and that's why you may react to things a certain way is one thing. And it's another thing to start with a proven, right, an
mm,
evidence-based um, system, practice
yeah,
processes that are have already been shown to us
yeah,
minimize those
yes,
risks
yeah.
because traumatized people don't make good decisions, right? We know this. We know this.
No,
We know this.
that's yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And so yeah, so thank you for saying that.
Mm,
And that's why like this I say we weren't supposed to exist because what you're doing, the work that you're doing is so important. And a lot of people don't know you exist. They don't know that these organizations exist. And
yeah,
I want them to be because they bring us hope, number
yes,
one, right? Like
yeah,
people are doing this
yeah,
work and look, and they're doing
mm,
it in a way that's sustainable, where access is built into the system, right? Because we talk a
yes,
lot about that in neurodivergent work, that access and accommodation and these types of things are not currently built into our educational systems, right? Or most of our workplaces. Some do better than others, right? But and so these practices are neurodivergent affirming. They are they don't need the label to be that. And because they start from that place of power, which I just think is light bulb, right?
well, it's pretty foundational, right?
Hmm.
Depending on how one defines power, pardon me. Um, yeah, I define power as the force of enactment, so it's rather large and it leaves room for a lot of different definitions, but it's certainly ubiquitous with that definition. And yeah, yeah. One of the things that so I'm also a late comer to the game. I know I've been different from the time I was little, but I had a lot of other reasons I could attribute that to, and so it really took me until very recently to recognize that oh yeah. I'm definitely neurodivergent. And one of the things that I have appreciated so much about this ecology of practices, which synthesizes things like sociocracy and holacracy, but it transcends them as well because neither one of those two include things that are vital for example, NBC. Neither one of them include NBC. NBC or NBC
Hmm.
type stuff is vital, like for resolving interpersonal conflict. So
Hmm.
my goal was to be comprehensive.
Yeah.
My understanding was if power is the force of enactment, it's we have to be comprehensive in terms of how we approach it. And so
Mhm.
that was my goal, and it was also my goal to create something that was clear and stable, so that anybody walking into the room could understand how to participate, how
Yeah.
to share their power, where does their power end and someone else's power begin.
Yeah.
Those simple clarities are so relieving, and not just for me, but like every team I've taught, that has been the first thing. It's like this is a relief
Mhm.
to have these things clear, right? And they're not just like running the show implicitly under the, undercover, but
Yeah.
they're out there, and we all can have we can all have input into what these structures are.
Yeah.
Um, and that's very empowering, but also just relieving, tremendously relieving. And I think, and perhaps especially for neurodivergents who do a lot of extra work to try to deal with that, all of that implicit stuff.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. I think all the autistic people listening right now are like, yes, thank you. Instruction. Tell us exactly what you are doing here, and we are good. I know
yes,
exactly what
please.
we're doing. I'm gold. I mean, I might have some suggestions or something, but I'm
Yeah,
golden. If I know the process,
yeah,
it relieves so much stress and it helps me to bring my full self to any um situation when
exactly.
I just have clear and precise instruction, or however
Yeah,
we want to put that, not necessarily always instruction, but a clear and precise how I'm supposed to be in this space. How am I supposed to show up in this space? If I
yeah.
know that, then I'm much less likely to accidentally harm, which as an autistic human,
Yes, right.
I
Yeah.
have done that so many times in my
Hmm.
life where I just didn't have a full grasp of all of those kind of implicit assumptions
Yeah.
of a social space, and I've caused harm because of that.
Hmm.
And on the reverse side, I've been harmed because of that,
Yes.
because of
Yeah.
a mistranslation mostly, but
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
all of those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, oh gosh, I'm so happy we had this conversation. This is just wonderful. I love hearing about Round Sky Solutions. And do you want to tell our listeners where they can find your work? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, roundskysolutions.com. If you do /resources, there's a bunch of free stuff there, including lots of old webinars. And yeah, sign up for our newsletter list if you'd like. We do offer more free webinars regularly, and that's a good place to get started. If you're interested in the commenting standard, you can also do a /commenting-standard and get the overview of what that work is about. And if any of you are curious about participating in that, please do drop a note. It's a very exciting, blossoming new project, which really excited to bring to the world.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm,
Thank you so much for
mm.
being here. And thanks to my
Thanks,
listeners,
Cher.
our listeners. Uh, yeah, I don't ever know how to end this. Peace out.